Well, hello, class. I'm talking to you today about the geography of Hinduism to kick off our last unit of the course, which is going to be about South Asia. South Asia includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and some smaller countries such as Nepal, the Maldives, and Sri Lanka. A couple others in there. But for the most part, we're talking about the dominant countries of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, which at one time were all one country. We'll talk about this more in class, but they were all one country under the colonial power of the British. And as we will talk about, they divided up after independence from the United Kingdom in the 1940s, and they divided up largely along religious lines. And as we've talked about before, we say religious lines, but of course that also refers to culture and divisions, cultural and social divisions that go back a long, long time between these groups of people. But let's talk today a little bit about the dominant religion of India, and that is Hinduism. We've talked about a number of different religious faiths through this course. And in some ways, this may be the most unfamiliar to most of us, the strangest of any of these faiths that we've talked about. That's my German Shepherd barking in the distance there, if you hear her. We're looking at a couple of images of Hindu gods, and I say gods plural because this is one unfamiliar aspect of Hinduism. Unlike all the religions that we've talked about to this point, Hinduism is polytheistic. The Christian, the Jewish, Muslim faith are all monotheistic, meaning there's one God. The Hindu faith has multiple gods, polytheistic. It is also one of the oldest religions there is, going back for millennia in documented history and deep into the shadows of undocumented history. Now, I have studied a fair amount of Hindu philosophy, but I can tell you I still find it very confusing. I think it's a fascinating religion, like all the world's religions, but boy, it seems like one you pretty much have to have been born into to be able to understand with any level of depth or subtlety. There are many, many gods involved, and just to make it more complicated, not only are there many gods, but the gods can appear in a wide variety of different forms or avatars. Avatar, a term you're probably familiar with if you're a gamer or seen certain movies, but avatar, a different manifestation of God, and the gods can appear in some cases sometimes as male, sometimes as female, variety of different forms. There is one, I guess, head god, or Brahma, shown on the title page of this, but my understanding is that even though he's kind of the top dog god, he doesn't necessarily have absolute power. And there are many other gods, some of which appear in forms that will seem very strange to many of us, probably no less so than Ganesha. Ganesha is the elephant god, and there are many, many stories about how Ganesha came about in present form. The ones I've heard have to do with that Ganesha's father was very jealous, and he came home and suspected his wife of, I guess, being out at war or whatever you did back then in the old days, and came back and suspected that his wife may have had a lover and chopped the head off of the suspect in rage and realized that he had chopped the head off of his own son, and ordered his men to replace the son, and the closest head they could find was a young elephant. Ganesha also typically is missing a tusk because he tore one off one time to write an important message, and so on and so on. I forget much of my Ganesha stories. These, again, may seem very absurd to those of us who are raised in the more familiar Christian or Jewish or Muslim faith, but there is a very, very rich vein of stories which tell important moral lessons. A lot of these stories have been incorporated into learning today in the United States, including stories that are told many times in yoga classes or other classics to study Eastern religions. And again, there are a wide variety of different morals that are represented through this. If you want to hear a devotional song to Ganesha that actually comes from a yoga practitioner, a yoga teacher right in New Orleans, I've got the web address on my second slide here for a YouTube of what I think is a beautiful song that they wrote talking about the story of Ganesha. My next slide talks about the flying monkey, Hanuman. Once again, may seem a little odd, little strange, but it is a terrific story. Hanuman is known for great devotion. This depicts him leaping across the ocean to come to the support of one of the great gods that he was completely devoted to. Once again, important moral lessons that are passed on, have been passed on for millennia, and the quality of these stories is shown by how many centuries, how many millennia they have lasted. Another song here, if you're interested, on YouTube, Krishna Das was an American rock singer, with a lot of promise to become a very wealthy and probably a very hard-partying rock singer, but he wasn't satisfied with his life. He moved to India, studied the Hindu faith in India, and when his teacher died, he came back to the United States and has made a name for himself in these circles. An extraordinarily strong voice, and this is a song about Hanuman and devotion to Hanuman. There are plenty of other stories. The goddess Kali, if you want to look at her image, with typically shown with skulls around her neck and heads of men that she's slain. I don't remember all of my Kali stories, but again, a lot of stories or metaphors, if you prefer, about her expressions of emotion and strength as a woman. A key element, a particularly well-known element of Hinduism, looking at my next slide here, is reincarnation. Reincarnation is the idea that one comes back after death, not automatically to an afterlife, but comes back to Earth. And one might come back to Earth in a superior life, wealthier or more prestigious than you were before, or the opposite. One might come back to life in a form that's poorer or lowlier, or perhaps even an animal form. And a lot of this depends on one's karma. Karma are lessons, perhaps you might think of it, that have to be learned. That a certain amount of baggage that one picks up, either positive or negative, and it sometimes can take many, many, many lives to work your way through this baggage and to finally liberate yourself from the burden, from the pains of life. It's a reassuring idea for many people, but it also has some ramifications for daily life. Looking at my next slide in the pyramid of castes in India, one of the critiques or criticisms, one of the concerns about Hinduism as it's often practiced, is that traditionally, if you are sent back in a higher form or a lower form, it's because you earned it in the previous life. And so people who are brought back to the highest, the Brahmin caste in life, again, earned it through previous lives. They are perfectly entitled to whatever wealth or power they may have. On the other hand, if you're born in the Sudra caste, commoners, peasants, servants, that's what you the bed you made, and you need to lie in it in this present life. Below that, even out of caste, what are sometimes called the untouchables, the more accepted term now is Dalit, are those who are sent down to the lowest of the low, are not even in a caste. And traditionally, these people were considered fit only for the absolute worst jobs, street sweepers, cleaning out toilets, etc. They were hardly worthy of education or a number of other good things in life, simply because their previous actions put them in this situation. Now, the caste system and poor treatment of the Dalits is still widely practiced in a number of areas in India today, especially some of the rural, more conservative areas. But there is a strong movement in modern India to try to overcome the problems of the caste system. There are laws against mistreatment of people according to their caste, or mistreatment of people who are Dalit or out of caste. In fact, there are even programs of affirmative action for Dalits to try to overcome centuries and centuries of discrimination, trying to provide them with adequate education, opportunities for schools, trying to get them into government, etc., and bring them into the system. A lot of progress has been made, but also a lot of progress to be made. That a lot of time, a lot of centuries of this practice, of this culture, will take a long time to overcome. Hinduism has diffused widely around the world geographically, but not hugely in terms of numbers. Perhaps some of it is just it's such a complex religion, such a religion that's so closely tied to culture, that it has not spread in the ways that Muslim or Christianity has, where it's dominated other places. Instead, you tend to find fairly small communities, minority communities, where Indians have traveled, where they have settled. And this map that I'm looking at here shows that there are a significant number of Indians that live today in the United Kingdom. In certain places in the Caribbean, they were brought over as indentured servants. Trinidad and Tobago, for example. South Africa, same story. And here in North America, in the United States, there are significant Indian populations. Not huge. They don't compete with Latinos or African Americans or other minority groups, but substantial. And many of them are very well off, that they have come over as, in many cases, professional engineers, professors, doctors, and so on. I'm looking at another map here that indicates percentage of the population that's Hindu, and you'll see again very much concentrated in India, with less than 5% of the population in North America, in South Asia, a little larger in the case of Guyana in South America, but mostly not large. But you'll find it even here in Mississippi, as we've talked about with virtually every religious faith that we've talked about. There is at least one Hindu temple in the state of Mississippi that I'm aware of, and that's in Brandon, Mississippi, a beautiful structure. There are a number of them in other places where you have larger populations. Dallas, for example, has some significant Hindu population, temple, and there is even a radio station that broadcasts, I guess, 24 hours a day to the Indian population. There is a community in South Mississippi near, it is southern part of the state. I'm drawing a blank on what the name of the community is, but it is called the New Taliban community. It is very friendly, welcoming. You can go to visit, and they will provide you with a vegetarian meal, and you can attend their celebrations, which are very colorful. I have not yet had the opportunity to go, but I know a number of people who have, and have found them to be a very friendly community, living according to Hindu traditions and studying the Hindu faith. So once again, wherever you may travel in Mississippi, never doubt that we are in a fascinating place. Oh, Carrier, Mississippi is where the new Taliban community is. That we have a fascinating population that I continue to learn about as we go along. Probably one of the strongest aspects of Indian culture is Indian movies. India has the second biggest movie producing culture besides the United States, besides Hollywood. Mainly for the Indian population, which is huge. India, of course, is well over 1 billion people alone, plus their population that is spread around the world. So it's a large audience. Typically it's referred to as Bollywood, kind of a takeoff on Hollywood, but the Bollywood film industry is huge. It is often very amusing. Once again, if you don't know anything about the culture, a lot of it is very much inspired by Hindu myths and tradition. Lots of singing, lots of dancing. I give you one example from YouTube here to look at and enjoy, I hope. I hope you take advantage while you're in Hattiesburg here of the excellent Indian Delight restaurant. I had complained for many years that we did not have any sort of Indian restaurant, and we do now. Give it a try sometime. Be adventurous. Be prepared that some of the food may be spicy, and you may want to order for Americans if you don't have an Indian taste for hot food or spicy food. But it is terrific, and I've gone there with Indian friends who assure me that it is very authentic, and I can assure you it is very good and very fulfilling. So it's not a homework assignment, but give it a try. Check out these YouTube videos. I hope you have a terrific holiday, and I'll be back with you soon.